The moonlight cast long shadows across the empty road as Andrew drove his sleek black Audi through the quiet streets of Oakridge. The small suburban town was asleep, with only a few streetlights illuminating the path ahead. Andrew loosened his tie and checked his watch, just past midnight. His business conference in Chicago had actually been a carefully orchestrated intelligence operation, something he'd grown used to in his 10 years as a CIA field operative. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel to the soft jazz playing through his car speakers. The operation had gone well. His target had revealed critical information about a domestic threat, and now all Andrew wanted was to get home, write his report, and maybe catch a few hours of sleep. The flash of red and blue lights in his rearview mirror made him frown. Andrew checked his speed. He was going exactly at the limit. He hadn't run any stop signs or made any illegal turns. With a sigh, he pulled over to the shoulder and put the car in park. 2 police officers approached his vehicle, one on each side. The taller one, with a badge reading Detective Wilson, shined a flashlight directly into Andrew's eyes. "License and registration," Detective Wilson demanded, not bothering with a greeting or explanation for the stop. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" Andrew asked calmly, reaching slowly for his wallet. "Just hand over your ID," the second officer snapped. His nameplate read Officer Hayes, and his hand rested unnecessarily on his holster. Andrew carefully handed over his driver's license and the car registration. "I believe I was following all traffic laws, sir." Detective Wilson studied the license with a smirk. "Pretty fancy car for this neighborhood. Where you coming from this late?" "I'm returning from a business trip in Chicago," Andrew replied, maintaining his cover story. "I work for a security consulting firm." The officers exchanged a look that made Andrew's instincts flare. He'd seen that look before in his line of work, the silent communication between people about to do something they shouldn't. "Step out of the vehicle, please," Officer Hayes ordered. "May I ask why?" Andrew questioned, keeping his voice level despite the growing tension. "We receive reports of drug trafficking in the area," Detective Wilson said. "Your vehicle matches the description." Andrew knew this was a lie. His government-issued Audi was clean, recently washed, with diplomatic plates that these small-town cops were apparently ignoring. Still, he complied, stepping carefully out of the car with his hands visible. "I'm going to need you to stand over here while Officer Hayes checks your vehicle," Detective Wilson said, guiding Andrew to the front of the police cruiser. What happened next, Andrew observed with trained precision. While Detective Wilson kept him distracted with questions about his trip, Officer Hayes conducted what should have been a standard search. But there was nothing standard about the way Hayes slipped his hand into his own pocket before reaching under the driver's seat, or the triumphant look he gave his partner afterward. Well, what do we have here?" Officer Hayes emerged from the car holding a small bag of white powder that Andrew knew with absolute certainty hadn't been there before. "That's not mine," Andrew stated firmly, his mind already calculating his options. The tiny camera disguised as a tie pin on his chest was recording everything. So was the dashboard camera in his car, standard CIA issue for all field operatives. "They all say that," Detective Wilson laughed, roughly turning Andrew around and placing handcuffs on his wrists. "You're under arrest for possession of narcotics with intent to distribute." "I'd like to call my attorney," Andrew said, still keeping his voice steady as they led him to the police car. "You'll get your phone call at the station," Officer Hayes replied with a sneer. "One more dealer off our streets." As they pushed him into the back seat of the patrol car, Andrew caught sight of Detective Wilson high-fiving Officer Hayes. They had no idea who they'd just arrested. No idea about the storm they had just brought upon themselves. Andrew sat quietly in the back of the police car, appearing defeated to the officers. Inside, however, his mind was already forming a plan. These corrupt cops had just made the biggest mistake of their careers, and they didn't even know it yet. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Andrew sat on a cold metal bench. His wrists still bore the red marks from the handcuffs that had been removed only minutes ago. Around him, the station hummed with late-night activity, officers filling out paperwork, phones ringing, and the occasional burst of radio chatter. Andrew kept his face neutral as a tired-looking desk sergeant took his fingerprints, pressing each digit firmly onto an ink pad and then onto the card. Click, flash. The booking camera captured his face from the front and sides. Throughout the process, Andrew remained silent, observing everything with the careful attention of someone trained to notice details. He saw how Officer Hayes whispered to other cops, pointing in his direction with a smug grin. He noticed Detective Wilson speaking with an older man in a crisp uniform adorned with captain's bars. Processing the drug dealer now, Captain Reeves, Andrew overheard Detective Wilson say, "High-end car, expensive suit, but had nearly an ounce of cocaine under his seat. Typical dealer profile." The captain nodded approvingly. "Good work. The mayor's been on my back about cleaning up drug traffic. This arrest will look good for the department." Andrew looked down to hide the flash of understanding in his eyes. This wasn't just about two corrupt cops. This was systematic. They were using him as a trophy arrest to boost department stats. A young officer led Andrew to a small holding cell and locked the door behind him. "You get your phone call in the morning," he said flatly. "I need to make that call now," Andrew replied, his voice calm but firm. "It's my right." The young officer hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. One call. Make it quick." At the wall-mounted phone, Andrew dialed a number few people in the world knew existed. When the line connected, he spoke in what sounded like casual conversation to anyone listening nearby. "Hey, it's me. Got held up in Oak Ridge. Missed my connecting flight. Could you let Aunt Liz know I'll be delayed? Check my calendar and reschedule my appointments. The Blackwood project needs attention by morning." To the officer standing nearby, it sounded like a man calling a friend to handle some business matters. In reality, Andrew had just activated an emergency protocol using coded phrases. Blackwood was the designation for compromised operatives. Aunt Liz referred to Deputy Director Fiona Chen at Langley headquarters. Connecting flight and calendar provided his exact location and the nature of his detainment. After hanging up, Andrew was returned to the holding cell. He sat on the thin mattress and closed his eyes, appearing defeated to anyone watching. In truth, he was mentally reviewing every detail of his arrest, memorizing faces, names, and exact words spoken. Meanwhile, at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, Deputy Director Chen was already in motion. The overnight analyst who had received Andrew's coded call had immediately escalated it. Chen, still in her evening clothes, strode into the Secure Operations Center, her face a mask of controlled intensity. "What do we have?" she asked sharply. "Agent Taylor, designation Blackwood 7, arrested in Oak Ridge, likely on false charges," a young analyst reported. "His tracking beacon shows he's at the Oak Ridge Police Department. Last mission was domestic surveillance of the Burlington Group." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Get me everything on the Oak Ridge PD. Every officer, every complaint, every commendation. And find me a lawyer with clearance who can be there by morning. No direct CIA connection yet. We need to understand what we're dealing with first." Back in Oak Ridge, Captain Reeves looked over the booking paperwork with satisfaction. "This is good. The prosecutor will love this case. Clean arrest, clear evidence. Let's push for maximum charges." Detective Wilson nodded. "We can claim he was part of a larger network we're investigating. That'll give us leverage." Neither man noticed the small red light on Andrew's confiscated tie pen, still recording, still transmitting to a secure server that would soon provide irrefutable evidence of their corruption. As the night deepened, Andrew lay on the cell bunk, seemingly another black man caught in a system stacked against him. But unlike others who had been wrongfully arrested in this station, Andrew wasn't helpless. By sunrise, one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world would be working to expose the truth. The small-town police force had unknowingly picked a fight they couldn't possibly win. Andrew closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to plan. The reckoning was coming. Morning light filtered through the small bad window of Andrew's cell. He had barely slept, his mind working through every possible angle of his situation. The cell door clanged open, and a different officer from the night before stood there with a bored expression. "You made bail," the officer said, sounding surprised. "Someone paid it about 20 minutes ago." Andrew stood up, straightening his wrinkled suit. He knew the CIA worked fast, but this was impressive even by their standards. As he was led to the processing desk to collect his belongings, he spotted a tall, distinguished black man in a perfectly tailored Navy suit waiting in the lobby. The man stood with quiet confidence, a leather briefcase at his feet. "I'm Vincent Howard," the man said when Andrew approached. "I'll be representing you in this matter." Andrew recognized the name. Vincent Howard wasn't just any lawyer, he was former Justice Department with security clearance high enough to handle sensitive intelligence cases. The CIA had sent one of their best legal operators. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Andrew replied, playing along with the lawyer-client relationship they needed to maintain for appearances. Outside the station, Vincent led Andrew to a black sedan with tinted windows. Only when the doors closed and a signal jammer was activated did Vincent speak freely. "Deputy Director Chen sends her regards," Vincent said, his formal tone relaxing slightly. "Your recording devices were excellent. We've already reviewed the footage from your tie pin and car cameras." "How bad is it?" Andrew asked. "For them?" "Catastrophic," Vincent replied, opening his laptop. "But it's even bigger than your arrest. Look at this." The screen showed a series of faces, mugshots of Black and Latino men and women, dozens of them. Every single one arrested by Wilson or Hayes in the past 3 years. "We've analyzed the pattern. Nearly 80% of their arrests follow the same profile. Minority drivers in nice cars, pulled over for minimal or non-existent violations, drugs found during searches." Andrew leaned back, taking in the scope of the corruption. "So I wasn't just unlucky." "Far from it," Vincent confirmed. "But here's where it gets interesting. The district attorney, Priscilla Montgomery, has personally prosecuted most of these cases. High conviction rate makes her look tough on crime for her upcoming election campaign." "She's in on it." Vincent shrugged. "We don't know yet if she's corrupt or just negligent. Either way, she's building her career on false arrests." The car pulled up outside a small but elegant hotel on the edge of town. "We've set up a base of operations here," Vincent explained. "Room 212. The agency wants you to maintain your cover for now. Officially, you're just a businessman fighting a wrongful arrest." Inside the hotel room, Andrew found everything he needed: fresh clothes, secure communication equipment, and files on everyone involved in his case. On a laptop, the face of Deputy Director Chen appeared in a video call. "Agent," she greeted him formally. "Good to see you in one piece." "Thank you for the rapid response, ma'am," Andrew replied. "Don't thank me yet," Chen said grimly. "We've uncovered something concerning. Captain Reeves has connections to City Hall and the District Attorney's office. This goes beyond a few corrupt cops. It's a system they've built to target minorities, pad arrest statistics, and advance careers." Andrew nodded, remembering the conversation he'd overheard. The captain mentioned pressure from the mayor. "Exactly," Chen confirmed. "We're dealing with potential corruption throughout local government. The Justice Department is interested, but they need more evidence before they can launch a full investigation." "So where does that leave me?" Andrew asked. "You're going to court," Vincent answered. "We could pull strings, get charges dropped quietly. But that wouldn't stop them from doing this to someone else tomorrow." Chen nodded on the screen. "We have authorization from the director himself. You'll maintain your cover through preliminary hearings. We'll gather additional evidence on everyone involved. Then, when the time is right, we spring the trap," Andrew finished, understanding the plan. Over the next few days, Vincent and Andrew prepared for court while CIA analysts dug deeper into Oak Ridge's police department. They uncovered a disturbing pattern spanning years: targeted harassment, evidence tampering, and dozens of potentially innocent people serving time on fabricated charges. Meanwhile, District Attorney Montgomery held a press conference on the courthouse steps. "We will aggressively prosecute drug traffickers in our community," she declared to the cameras. "The defendant's expensive car and clothes don't make him above the law." Local activists began organizing protests, having recognized the pattern of racial profiling long before the CIA got involved. Signs reading "Justice for All" and "Stop the Profiling" appeared outside the courthouse. As Andrew watched the news coverage from his hotel room, Vincent arrived with a thin smile. "They've just filed formal charges, maximum penalties as expected." "Good," Andrew replied, surprising Vincent. "The bigger they make this case, the harder they'll fall," Vincent finished. "Preliminary hearing is tomorrow." "Are you ready?" Andrew straightened his tie, a new one, with an even better hidden camera. I've been ready since they pulled me over. The courthouse stood tall against the morning sky, its stone steps already crowded with reporters and curious onlookers. Andrew adjusted his tie as he climbed those steps beside Vincent, both men ignoring the shouted questions from the press. Inside, the hallway buzzed with activity. Lawyers hurrying between courtrooms, police officers standing in small groups, and families waiting anxiously on hard wooden benches. Detective Wilson and Officer Hayes stood near the courtroom door, both looking confident in freshly pressed uniforms. They smirked when they spotted Andra. "Look who decided to show up," Hayes muttered loud enough to be heard. Vincent placed a calming hand on Andra's shoulder, though Andra hadn't reacted at all to the taunt. His CIA training had prepared him for far worse than a small-town cop's attempts at intimidation. "Ignore them," Vincent whispered. "Remember the plan." The plan was simple but brilliant. For now, they would play the role of an ordinary defendant and his lawyer. Vincent would request minimal discovery, ask few questions during the preliminary hearing, and give the impression of a weak defense. The goal wasn't to win at this stage, it was to let the corrupt officials grow overconfident. A tall man with silver hair and a captain's uniform approached Wilson and Hayes. Captain Reeves spoke intensely to his officers, occasionally glancing toward Andra. "They're getting their stories straight," Andra murmured. Vincent nodded slightly. "The hidden microphone in your watch should pick up their conversation if you walk by casually." Andra did just that, moving to a water fountain near the group. As he bent to take a drink, Captain Reeves's voice became clearer. "Stick to exactly what we discussed," the captain was saying. "The drugs were in plain sight when you approached the vehicle. You had reasonable suspicion based on the time of night and the neighborhood. Keep it simple." "What if the lawyer asks about the body cameras?" Officer Hayes asked. "Technical malfunction," Reeves replied firmly. "They were charging in the station and didn't get deployed. It happens all the time." Andrew returned to Vincent's side, giving a slight nod to confirm he'd captured the conversation. Just then, a striking woman in a sharp charcoal suit walked purposefully down the hall, flanked by two assistants carrying stacks of files. District Attorney Montgomery stopped briefly to speak with Captain Reeves before continuing into the courtroom. "The gang's all here," Vincent commented dryly. At 9:30 sharp, they entered courtroom 3. Judge Lawrence Powell, a thin man with thick glasses and a reputation for harsh sentences, presided from the bench. The gallery was packed with reporters and community members on both sides, some supporting the police, others there to protest what they saw as another example of racial profiling. The preliminary hearing began with formalities. Charges read, "Please entered." Andra stood calmly as the clerk announced the charges: possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice. "How do you plead?" Judge Powell asked. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Andra replied clearly. District Attorney Montgomery approached the bench first. "Your Honor, the state has a strong case against the defendant. Officers recovered a significant quantity of cocaine during a routine traffic stop. The defendant's expensive vehicle and late-night presence in an area known for drug activity gave officers reasonable cause for the stop." She continued painting Andra as a dangerous drug dealer for nearly 15 minutes, her words clearly aimed as much at the reporters in the room as at the judge. When Vincent's turn came, he surprised everyone with his brevity. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. We request all evidence be preserved and all officers' notes be made available to the defense. Beyond that, we'll reserve our arguments for trial." Judge Powell seemed surprised. "That's all, Counselor." "For now, Your Honor," Vincent replied with a slight smile. The judge set a trial date for 3 weeks later. As they left the courtroom, Andrew noticed Captain Reeves and D.A. Montgomery exchanging pleased glances. Their overconfidence was growing exactly as planned. Outside, community activists had gathered, their numbers growing since the morning. A woman with a megaphone led chants about justice and accountability. Several people held signs with photos of others who claimed to have been framed by the same officers. Back in their hotel room, Andra and Vincent debriefed with Deputy Director Chen via secure video link. "They took the bait," Vincent reported. "Montgomery thinks we have a weak case." "Perfect," Chen replied. "We've finished our background investigation. Captain Reeves has 3 properties he shouldn't be able to afford on his salary. The DA has been dismissing complaints against these officers for years while fast-tracking their cases. What about the judge? Andrew asked. Clean, surprisingly, Chen answered. Just conservative and trusting of law enforcement. He's not part of the corruption. Andrew nodded. That might work in our favor. If he realizes he's been used to imprison innocent people. Exactly, Chen agreed. The Justice Department is ready to move as soon as we reveal the evidence in court. They'll take over the entire department if necessary. As night fell over the small town, the pieces were falling into place. In the police station, Detective Wilson and Officer Hayes laughed about how easy the hearing had been. In the district attorney's office, Montgomery added Andrew's case to her growing list of wins for her campaign materials. None of them suspected that in just a few weeks, their careers and freedom would be hanging in the balance. Andrew stared out the hotel window at the lights of the town, thinking about all the innocent people these corrupt officials had hurt over the years. It won't be long now, he said quietly to himself. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Powell entered and took his seat at the bench. The trial day had arrived, and the room was packed to capacity. Local news cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking steadily. Andrew sat beside Vincent at the defense table, both men calm and collected in their perfectly pressed suits. Across the aisle, District Attorney Montgomery arranged her papers with confident movements. Behind her, Detective Wilson and Officer Hayes sat with perfect posture, their uniforms spotless and badges gleaming. Captain Reeves had chosen a seat directly behind them, where he could watch everything. All rise, the bailiff called out. The Court of Oak Ridge County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Lawrence Powell presiding. After the formalities, D.A. Montgomery approached the podium for her opening statement. Her voice rang clear through the courtroom speakers. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is simple. On the night of April 15th, the defendant was driving through a known drug trafficking area well after midnight. When Officers Wilson and Hayes pulled him over for a routine traffic stop, they discovered a substantial amount of cocaine hidden under the driver's seat. She paced confidently, gesturing toward Andra. The defendant was wearing an expensive suit, driving a luxury car registered to a shell company, and carrying multiple phones. These are the hallmarks of a drug dealer, not a legitimate businessman. The evidence will show beyond any reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of all charges. When Vincent stood for the defense opening, he kept it brief. Your Honor, members of the jury, my client is innocent. The evidence will show that not only did Officers Wilson and Hayes plant the drugs in his vehicle, but that this was part of a pattern of corrupt behavior targeting minorities in this community. We ask only that you listen carefully to the evidence presented today. The shortness of his statement caused murmurs in the courtroom. D.A. Montgomery smiled slightly, clearly believing the defense had nothing substantial to offer. The trial proceeded with the prosecution calling Detective Wilson to the stand first. He testified confidently about spotting Andrew's car, becoming suspicious, and conducting the traffic stop. When asked about finding the drugs, he described reaching under the driver's seat and discovering the bag of cocaine in plain view. Throughout the testimony, Vincent took minimal notes and asked few questions during cross-examination. He merely confirmed basic facts about the time, location, and procedures followed. The detective left the stand looking pleased with himself. Officer Hayes followed with similar testimony, corroborating his partner's account of events. Again, Vincent's cross-examination was surprisingly brief, focusing only on whether body cameras had been worn that night. No, sir, Officer Hayes replied. Our cameras were charging at the station. Department policy requires them, but we had technical difficulties that night. Vincent nodded as if accepting this explanation. No further questions, Your Honor. D.A. Montgomery looked increasingly triumphant as she called the lab technician who had tested the cocaine, then the evidence clerk who had logged it into the system. By mid-afternoon, she addressed the court confidently. The prosecution rests, Your Honor. Judge Powell turned to Vincent. Does the defense wish to present any evidence or witnesses? Vincent stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Andrew Thompson to the stand. Andrew walked to the witness box with measured steps. After being sworn in, he answered Vincent's initial questions about his background with a calm, steady voice. He described himself as a security consultant, explaining his late-night drive as a return from a business meeting in Chicago. "Mr. Thompson," Vincent asked, "did you have any illegal substances in your vehicle that night?" "No, sir, I did not," Andrew replied firmly. "Did you see either Officer Hayes or Detective Wilson plant evidence in your vehicle?" "Yes. Officer Hayes reached into his pocket before reaching under my seat. When his hand came out, it was holding a bag that wasn't there before." DA Montgomery stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. This is the defendant's word against two sworn officers of the law." "I understand your concern, Counselor," Vincent replied smoothly, "but my next question will address that." He turned back to Andra. "Mr. Thompson, is there any way to verify what actually happened during your traffic stop?" Andra nodded. "Yes. My car is equipped with several security cameras as part of my work in the security industry. They record continuously whenever the vehicle is in use." A ripple of surprise went through the courtroom. Detective Wilson and Officer Hayes exchanged alarmed glances. Captain Reeves sat up straighter, his expression darkening. "Your Honor," Vincent announced, "the defense would like to present Exhibit A, video footage from Mr. Thompson's vehicle security system." As the bailiff set up the monitor, DA Montgomery approached the bench. "Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing about this evidence. The defense never shared this during discovery." Vincent joined them at the bench. "With all due respect, Your Honor, we requested all evidence be preserved." "The prosecution never asked for our evidence, assuming we had none. We were under no obligation to volunteer it." Judge Powell frowned but nodded. "I'll allow it. Proceed, Counselor." The lights dimmed and the monitor came to life. Crystal clear footage showed Andra's traffic stop from multiple angles, including a perfect view of Officer Hayes reaching into his pocket and then placing something under the driver's seat when he thought no one was watching. The audio captured every word spoken, including Detective Wilson's comment, "Another one for the books. The captain will be pleased." Gasps filled the courtroom. District Attorney Montgomery's face had gone pale. On the stand, Andrew remained perfectly composed. But Vincent wasn't finished. "Your Honor, I would also like to present Exhibit B." The second video showed Captain Reeves in his office with both officers, coaching them on what to say in court and how to handle questions about the missing body camera footage. "Just stick to the story," he was saying. "It's worked dozens of times before." The courtroom erupted in shocked conversations. Judge Powell banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order. I will have order in this court." When the room finally quieted, Vincent stood tall. "Your Honor, at this time, the defense has a special motion to present." He pulled an official-looking document from his briefcase. "I am formally identifying myself as Special Counsel Vincent Howard, operating under the authority of the United States Department of Justice and the Central Intelligence Agency." He handed the document to the judge. "And my client is not merely Andra Thompson, security consultant. He is a federal intelligence officer who was operating lawfully under executive authority on the night in question." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Federal marshals suddenly appeared at the doors. Detective Wilson half rose from his seat, looking ready to flee, but froze when a marshal stepped directly behind him. In the midst of the commotion, Andrew remained perfectly still on the witness stand, his eyes locked on the officers who had arrested him. The truth had finally exploded in court, exactly as planned. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Judge Powell had called an immediate recess, his face tight with anger as he ordered the bailiffs to ensure no one left the building. Federal marshals swarmed the courtroom, separating Detective Wilson and Officer Hayes from Captain Reeves. The district attorney sat alone at her table, her face ashen as she stared at the documents Vincent had provided to the court. Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed with frantic energy. Reporters rushed to call their newsrooms, bystanders whispered in shocked clusters, and more federal agents arrived by the minute. Andra stood with Vincent near a window, watching the chaos unfold with calm detachment. "You played your part perfectly," Vincent said quietly. Andra nodded. They'd never suspected a thing until it was too late. A tall woman in a dark suit approached them, flashing her Justice Department credentials. "Agent Thompson, Special Counsel Howard. The Attorney General is on a secure line and would like to speak with you both." They followed her to a private room that had been quickly converted into a temporary command center. Computers and communication equipment covered a large table, and several federal agents worked busily at their stations. On a secure video screen, the Attorney General of the United States waited with Deputy Director Chen beside him. "Excellent work," the Attorney General said without preamble. "We've been trying to crack police corruption cases like this for years, but could never get hard evidence that would stand up in court. What happens now?" Andra asked. "We're expanding the investigation to the entire department," Chen explained. "The evidence you gathered gives us probable cause for warrants on all their files, communications, and financial records. We've already found suspicious deposits in Captain Reeves's accounts that match dates of previous drug arrests." The Attorney General nodded grimly. "And it's not just Oak Ridge. We believe this may be happening in other departments across the state. Your case could be the key that helps us break open a much larger pattern of corruption." Back in the courtroom, Judge Powell had reconvened the session with a heavy expression. The gallery was packed even tighter now, with many straining to see what would happen next. In light of the evidence presented, the judge announced, his voice carrying through the silent room, "I am dismissing all charges against the defendant. Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate detention of Detective James Wilson, Officer Brian Hayes, and Captain Thomas Reeves, pending federal charges of evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and corruption." The three officers were handcuffed right there in the courtroom. Captain Reeves struggled briefly but went still when a marshal firmly gripped his shoulder. Detective Wilson stared straight ahead, his face empty of expression. Officer Hayes looked on the verge of tears. "District Attorney Montgomery," the judge continued, turning his stern gaze to her, "you will surrender all files related to cases handled by these officers to federal authorities immediately. The court will determine at a later date whether your office was negligent or complicit in these matters." Montgomery nodded weakly, unable to meet his eyes. As the officers were led away, the community activists who had been following the case erupted in cheers. Years of complaints that had fallen on deaf ears were finally being validated. People hugged each other, some crying with relief and vindication. Andrew watched it all from his seat, his mission nearly complete. The corrupt officers who had thought they were arresting just another black man had unwittingly triggered their own downfall. As he prepared to leave the courtroom, an elderly black woman touched his arm gently. "My grandson is serving 5 years because of those officers," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "Do you think he might get another chance now?" "Yes, ma'am," Andrew replied softly. "I believe he will." Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaotic. News vans lined the street, reporters shouted questions, and a crowd had gathered to watch the proceedings. Andrew and Vincent slipped out a side door to avoid the media frenzy. They found a quiet coffee shop a few blocks away to debrief. "The Justice Department is already reviewing every case those officers were involved in," Vincent said, checking his secure phone. "Early estimates suggest over 50 people might have been wrongfully convicted based on planted evidence." Andrew shook his head. "And that's just from 3 corrupt cops in one small department." "This is bigger than we initially thought," Vincent agreed. "Captain Reeves has already asked to cut a deal. He's offering information on corrupt officers in 3 neighboring counties." The conversation paused as the coffee shop's television switched to breaking news. The reporter stood outside the courthouse, speaking excitedly about the day's dramatic events. In a stunning development today, 3 Oak Ridge police officers were arrested in court after evidence revealed they had been planting drugs on innocent people for years. Federal authorities have launched a sweeping investigation, and sources say dozens of convictions may be overturned. The camera panned to show Detective Wilson and Officer Hayes being led to federal vehicles in handcuffs. Their faces, once smug with power, now showed fear and defeat. Andrew watched with satisfaction. His cover identity would soon disappear. The CIA would create a new background for him, and he would move on to another assignment. But what happened here in Oak Ridge would remain, a small but important victory for justice. Outside the coffee shop window, the sun was setting on the small town. For many of its citizens, tomorrow would bring a new dawn of accountability and hope.